My family insisted I leave my girlfriend, who was expecting our child, to preserve our reputation. 15 years down the road, when they requested to see their grandchild, what I revealed to them caused my mother to pass out right there on the porch. Do you ever get that sensation when someone makes a comment that seems insignificant, but it stays with you, just like a sharp piece of wood that's impossible to remove? That's precisely what happened to me one particular Sunday. Mom, in an offhanded way during our morning coffee, said, "You know, Nathan, you really need to consider your future more carefully. You're nearly 20. Time goes by so fast." I didn't really give it much thought at the time. I had just graduated high school and had a part-time job at a local cafe trying to figure things out. But looking back now, I understand that that was the pivotal moment. That little comment, seemingly harmless, created a hidden fissure. It was the moment that would completely disrupt my world in ways I never imagined. Then, Quinn came along. I found her at a coffee shop a few months later. She was this shy, somewhat introverted girl who always had a book nearby. What always got to me was how her eyes sparkled when she spoke about something she truly cared about, be it a novel she'd just read or something as ordinary as the current weather. I didn't realize it then, but I would spend the next few years getting to know her better and gradually understanding how profoundly she was reshaping my world. We started dating not long after that. There was this effortless, flowing connection between us. I cherished how she didn't feel obligated to fill every quiet moment. She accepted me even when I was clueless about my path, and I in turn didn't fault her for having aspirations that sometimes seemed unattainable. There was a connection, a shared understanding between us, and that's something special. Some months into our time together, Quinn told me something that would completely change everything. She was expecting a baby. Initially, I couldn't process it. I remember thinking, she must be wrong. I mean, I had always been careful, hadn't I? We discussed things like that, hadn't we? But there she sat, directly opposite me, clutching a pregnancy test with shaking hands. The atmosphere in the room felt heavy, and it wasn't just the overpowering aroma of coffee. My thoughts were racing, yet at the same time, everything seemed to move in slow motion. Quinn maintained her composure. She looked at me with those eyes that I'd fallen for and said, "We'll figure this out, Nathan. We can manage this." And that's when it struck me. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about us, about the possibility of a family. I could see it in her eyes, her genuine feelings, her confidence, but the fear was still there, lurking beneath the surface. I just wasn't prepared. Honestly, I wasn't sure if I could ever be ready. That evening, I did what anyone would do when confronted with something they didn't know how to navigate. I went to my parents. Perhaps they'd know what to do, or at least provide some direction. The expression on my father's face when I broke the news is something I'll never forget. There was a flash of anger, not. Precisely, more accurately, it felt like letdown. His eyes appeared to scan my features, although nothing was spoken. As though he was searching for something. He seemed to hope I'd give a signal that this was all a misunderstanding, that I was being facetious or mistaken. At last he spoke, his tone soft but definite. "Nathan, you're too young for this," he stated. "You haven't even graduated yet. What will the neighbors say? What kind of future do you think you'll have?" I had a strong urge to explain that none of it seemed to matter. The future didn't seem all that crucial. When I was holding Quinn's hand, realizing we were expecting a baby. But I didn't. I just stood there, motionless, as my mother chimed in. "You've brought shame upon us," she declared. Her eyes narrowed as her voice quivered a little. "This isn't the life we brought you up for. You're expected to concentrate on your future, not this. What will your father's friends think? What about the family reputation?" Her words cut like a blade, and I was completely unprepared. Family pride, those words lingered in the room, hanging like an accusation. I had always believed that family was about affection and encouragement, not conforming to some unwritten rule that we'd never even discussed. I attempted to say something, to tell them it wasn't like that, but my father interrupted. "You're going to put an end to this, Nathan. For your own benefit, for your future. This isn't the life we desire for you." Those words felt heavy, like they were settling in my heart. At that moment, I understood that they weren't merely expressing. They spoke on behalf of the whole family, voicing their vision of what I should accomplish, the tradition they expected me to uphold. They clearly disregarded that I loved Quinn and that we were expecting a child. All that concerned them was what they deemed appropriate. Making the choice wasn't easy, but I did. I left Quinn. I informed her that our relationship was finished. I explained that we couldn't continue, not because my feelings had changed, but because my folks had made it perfectly clear that my future hinged on choosing them, prioritizing my family above all else. The ensuing days were filled with immense sorrow. I couldn't get rid of the feeling that I'd just committed a massive blunder. I kept telling myself that I was doing the right thing. I repeated to myself that it was about protecting my future, following the path I had to take. But each time I considered Quinn, each time I thought about our baby, a piece of me shattered. I wasn't prepared for fatherhood, yet I was unwilling to abandon them either. Time passed. I kept away, immersing myself in my schoolwork and making an effort to stop thinking about Quinn or the life we could have built. I forced all those thoughts to the back of my mind, putting all my energy into making my parents content. I tried to act like the son they wanted, the type of person they believed I should become. But the void inside just kept expanding. Then, several months later, the phone rang. "Andrew is the name of your son." Quinn spoke quietly, though I could sense the thoughts she didn't say. "He belongs to you, Nathan." I found myself at a loss for how to react. I was unsure of my options, yet I knew all the progress I'd made in my life was resurfacing at once. It's strange how quickly life can change when you're not paying attention, how things become habits even before you've really digested them. When I chose to leave Quinn, I attempted to just keep going, as if I could evade the hurt. I suppose I figured that if I kept myself occupied enough, I wouldn't need to confront my actions. I recall those initial weeks following our separation. It wasn't a clean break. I didn't just disappear and forget about her. I kept wondering about Quinn and Andrew, and I'd wonder what they were up to. But at the same time, I ignored those thoughts. I wanted to avoid feeling guilty. I didn't want to let my thoughts drag me back into the mess I had caused. So I buried myself in school. I signed up for college not because I loved it, but because it was the obvious next thing to do. I didn't know what I was doing with my life, but at least I was keeping busy. I got a job at a tech startup, mostly because it seemed like it would please my folks. They were pleased with me. They certainly acted like it, and I saw them beam when they talked about my future. I wasn't the favorite child, Valentina was. I was always the overachiever, always the one who brought the family honor, but I had a part to play. I was simply fulfilling my obligations. Even so, everything felt wrong. There were times in the dead of night when my thoughts drifted to Andrew. I'd wonder what he looked like now. I hadn't seen him. It was Quinn who had given me his name that day, and I hadn't been around him since. That was so long ago, and I never went to see him. Occasionally, I'd listen to my coworkers talk about their children and their families, and I'd get this small ache in my chest, a sharp stab of sorrow that I couldn't get rid of. However, I concealed it. I hid it deep inside, convincing myself this was the life I had to agree with. I was making the correct choices. I was concentrating on my future. To be honest, it was like existing in a haze. I'd work, go to classes, accomplish whatever needed to be done. I had friends, yet they didn't know about Andrew, only Quinn. I kept them at a distance. The fewer people aware of the situation, the simpler it was to act like everything was okay. But then, something odd happened. I was at a family supper. My parents, Valentina, my aunt and uncle, the regular crowd, and my mother nonchalantly brought up something. It wasn't addressed to me directly, though it was enough to make me pause while I was eating. She commented that she was so pleased that Nathan was focused on his career right now. She added that he was doing really well. Even though I could sense her pride, it didn't feel right. That sense of accomplishment felt almost like a forced obligation, as if she were checking something off a list of expectations. And it hit me, I was just a character in their narrative. My own existence was on hold. Their vision for me was the only one I was living. I don't believe I ever actually shared this with anybody, but each time they complimented my successes, I felt a part of me wither. Everything was just a facade. The honest truth was that real happiness had vanished the moment I broke up with Quinn. I couldn't stop pondering about Andrew, wondering about his current state, who he had become. What would my life have been like if I hadn't let my folks control everything? This feeling of remorse was a constant companion. It went with me everywhere I went. I began concocting reasons to skip family gatherings, or even just to avoid calling my parents. Their presence became unbearable. Honestly, I felt like an outsider looking in on my own existence. The life they envisioned was completely different from the future I'd always envisioned. A year went by, and another. I'd become more adept at putting on a show, better at suppressing those late-night thoughts. I had a girlfriend. Cora was her name, and things were okay. She was intelligent, charming, yet we didn't delve into the heavy stuff. It was easy, but it wasn't a relationship that made me dream about what could have been. I attempted to convince myself I was content. I tried to convince myself that I had all the answers, but deep down, I knew something vital was missing. Something happened. That phone call was the thing that caused me to finally crack. It interrupted my sleep in the dead of night. I hadn't anticipated it, and initially I believed there'd been a mix-up. The number seemed unfamiliar, and I was still mostly out of it when I answered. "Hello," I mumbled, still feeling sleepy. A gentle, familiar voice responded. "Nathan, it's Quinn." I was completely speechless. My pulse started racing in my chest. What could she possibly be needing from me after all this time? I'd kept my distance, and she had as well. Then she uttered the one thing that completely knocked me off balance. "I've been giving this a lot of thought, and Andrew, he wants to see you." My entire world seemed to freeze. Andrew, my son. Those words slammed into me like a physical blow. I hadn't seen him in ages, hadn't been involved in his life in any way. And now, here I was, being informed that he wanted to get together with me. I just didn't know what to say. I felt a combination of regret, apprehension, and thrill, all crashing together in an enormous wave. Quinn paused, as though she was giving me time to absorb what she'd just told me. "I get it if you don't want to, Nathan, but I believe it's time." For him, for me, for both of us. The connection was lost after that. She didn't say farewell, didn't give me time to reply, but I didn't need her to. I understood the implications. I had a son, and he was hopping to meet me. I couldn't keep up the pretense any longer. I couldn't hide behind the life I'd created. This was undeniable, and regardless of whether I was ready. No kidding, it was time to deal with the repercussions of my choices, I realized. Even though I had no clue what to expect, I knew I had to meet with Andrew because of him. And for my own sake. This is the final update. Right away, when they appeared at my door, I could tell something wasn't right. It wasn't just the way they knocked, it was the moment they chose. The loud sound of the doorbell boomed through my place, and briefly, I thought I might have been hearing things. However, when I unlocked the door, there they were. My folks, I immediately noticed how they looked. They had both aged, sure, but it was more than just that. There was something I'd never seen before, a sense of urgency and desperation in their eyes. My mom, usually so collected and in control, looked as if she had just completed a race. My dad, who always carried himself with a quiet air of command, had his shoulders slumped and he was looking down. They stood there uncomfortably holding a bunch of flowers, as if attempting to make up for years of no communication with a solitary, delicate move. However, what really grabbed my attention wasn't the flowers. It was the way my mom paused before she said anything. "Nathan, we need to talk," she said, her voice quieter than usual. I didn't immediately ask them inside. I stood there for a few seconds, trying to figure it out. What were they doing here? After all this time, after everything that had happened, they just showed up. I couldn't deny that a part of me wanted to just shut the door on them. I'd spent years building a life without them, without their. I'd been so sure about my judgments, and yet here they were, wanting to be a part of things. But deep down, the side of me that clung to the thought of family, despite my attempts to escape it, was intrigued. I couldn't resist the urge to move out of the way and give them access. They settled onto the living room furniture like they owned the place. It felt like everything was normal, though everything was the complete opposite. The quiet in the room felt heavy and so awkward. I steeled myself, anticipating their words, but nothing could have prepared me for what they said next. "We want to see Andrew," my father mumbled, his voice barely audible. "Your son." The words hit me like a physical blow. I had no idea how to respond. I'd worked so hard to suppress my feelings of guilt, to go on with my life after what I had done, and now they wanted something I was unsure I could provide. I didn't even know if Andrew even wanted to meet them. I was infuriated, so incredibly angry, yet simultaneously a peculiar draw, a desire to let them back into my life, overwhelmed me. It would have been the simplest thing to decline, to send them away and protect what little tranquility I had left, but I couldn't do it. "Not this time. I'll ask him," I stated, my voice revealing a hint of my frustration. "But you don't understand, do you? He's not a project for you to repair. He is a human being, and I've been the one raising him." They both looked at me, but my mother's expression shifted to something that looked like remorse. "We know name. Nathan, I've reflected on this quite a bit, and frankly, I'm sorry. We failed you. I mean both of you. It was tough hearing that, really. Apologies, they weren't enough. Saying I'm sorry didn't make up for years of not being there, for the pressure they put on me that forced me to make choices I still regret. They weren't there for me, for Quinn, or for Andrew. They were gone, all in the name of their stupid pride. And now they wanted to be part of our lives again. It was almost ridiculous. Then something inside me just broke. I wasn't that frightened child anymore. I wasn't the one who had to obey their rules. And this was my opportunity to finally call the shots. "I'll set it up," I announced, standing up, my mind made up. "But I think it's time we were completely honest, don't you?" They looked at each other. My dad started to say something, but I stopped him. "I'm not doing this on your terms anymore," I told them. "You're going to hear about what I've gone through, what we've all gone through before you even see him. You can't just walk back into our lives like nothing happened." I saw when the reality of the situation sunk in. My mom's face lost some of its color, but she slowly nodded, clearly realizing that this wouldn't be a simple conversation. I left them there and grabbed my phone. I called Quinn, not sure how I felt about what I was about to ask. "Quinn," I said, my voice calm, "I need to speak with Andrew. Are you still okay with him meeting my parents?" There was a silence on the other end, and then Quinn. Her tone remained steady yet resolute as she spoke. "I truly don't know, Nathan. You were gone for a long time. I'm uncertain whether Andrew is prepared for all of this." Deep down, I recognized the validity of her words. It wasn't only my choice, yet a part of me desperately desired to reveal to my parents everything they had failed to experience, everything they had forfeited. This wasn't merely about reconnecting with Andrew. It was about settling a score, about compelling them to grapple with the repercussions of their choices. I think it's time for them to confront what they did, to truly see what they missed in the process. My words poured out, laced with more resentment than I anticipated. Quinn paused once more. "I'll speak with him. However, Nathan, if you press this, I can't predict his response." After I ended the call, the full gravity of what I'd set in motion began to sink in, but there was no retreating now. During the week that followed, Andrew consented to a meeting with them. However, their arrival didn't spark the joyous reconciliation they probably expected. They came to my place, unchanged in appearance, though I detected their unease. This wasn't the family they held in memory. This was a grown man, a father forced to mature rapidly, a man who wouldn't cave into their expectations any longer. Andrew, now towering over them, followed close behind me. He resembled me so much, but his eyes were Quinn's, those serene, penetrating eyes that always seemed perceptive. He greeted them with a handshake, but his features displayed anything but warmth. He didn't appear furious. Moreover, forgiveness wasn't in his expression either. My mother attempted to start a conversation. Andrew interrupted her. "You see, I don't know what you think," he stated calmly, his voice even. "But I'm not trying to cheer you up. I'm just here because my dad insisted." The room became incredibly tense. My mom and dad stood there, speechless, uncertain what to do. I observed them, and for the first time ever, I felt like I'd triumphed. Not due to succeeding in making them feel bad, but because I had grabbed the reins. I'd made them confront the harm they'd created. The harm I'd created. I had. I wasn't just their kid anymore. I was a person who had created my own existence apart from them, and now they'd have to face the fallout. The expression on my mom's face when she realized this, as she understood the emotional space between them and Andrew, was practically unbearable. She turned white, her legs giving way just as she started to speak. She lost consciousness, falling into my embrace. It seemed like the right outcome, and for the first time in ages, I felt completely unburdened.